So good morning, afternoon. My name is Marcy and I teach at Ridley College, which is a K-12 school located in St. Catharines, Ontario. And this year, one of the things I was experimenting was how to bring coding into my classroom. Now, for most people, when they think of coding, they think of something that looks like this, which I don't know how to read, and I'm sure some people in this room don't know how to read either. So it's pretty intimidating when people hear coding and they think about bringing it into their classroom. So I like to tell my students coding is just another way of writing instructions in another language. Thankfully, there's much more user-friendly ways of teaching kids to code, like code.org. So this is a drag-and-drop interface that provides immediate feedback for kids learning how to code. So this was a great start to coding in my classroom. But the problem was, it was still one extra thing. It wasn't part of my curriculum. My curriculum was already so overloaded, I didn't have time to do one more thing. I'm sure other people are in the same scenario. So what I did was I applied the TPAC lens to look for opportunities for integration. So what content was I already teaching that would allow me to use coding as a mechanism for my students to learn material and show their understanding? So these are my examples. Your examples will be different depending on your context. So first was in art. My students learned how to draw different lines, use the space on the screen, different colors, different shapes. This is an example of a piece of code and the artwork that it created. Next, I went to math. So in math, geometry was a perfect place for me to get started. 2D geometry is something that I teach, so my students have to learn how to draw different shapes. They all know how to draw squares and triangles by 4th grade. I still have to assess them on it. This way, I was able to have them drawing it in coding, and I could assess. They were learning a different skill. They also made probability games, so instead of dice and cards, they were much more creative in the diversity of things that my students were creating, which I enjoyed and the kids enjoyed. So these are some of the tools that I use. They're all available for free online. There's different tools if you teach K all the way through 12. So on the resources page, there's lots there. My favorites were Hopscotch and Scratch for 4th grade. But why did I want to do this? So motivation was high. My kids were into this. They wanted to do it. And it was something that I thought was really interesting, and it had peripheral benefits, not just teaching them how to code. So thinking skills are naturally embedded in the coding process. So through my students' coding, they were building their thinking skills. So one of the main thinking skills that my students were developing was the iterative design process. So I don't know if you're familiar with the iterative design process, but it's a process of prototyping, testing, analyzing, and refining. So in coding, they're taking a big problem, they're breaking it down into small parts, and they're testing their theory to see if it works, and then they add on the next layer. So this is a transferable skill to many other disciplines. They're also problem solving. They're given a problem, each group takes it a different way, and in the end, they come up with a different solution. So they can see that there's not always one solution to a problem. Next, my students were collaborating. I don't have one-to-one in my classroom, so they were working together. They were going and asking different people in the classroom. They were seeing that I didn't have all the knowledge. They were using their friends and their partners to help them work through it. So this is an example of some kids in my class. And they also had character building skills. So they were persevering, they were displaying determination, grit. Coding isn't easy, but it's motivating and the kids love it, so they stick with it and they want to get to the solution. They want their program to work, so they're willing to put in that effort. So currently there's a gap in the number of students that are coming out of universities with computer science degrees and the number that are required in industry. So this is something that, looking forward, my students may want to pursue a career in this area. So the problem is it's often not taught in schools. Many schools don't have a curriculum for computer programming, and so kids can't pursue things that they're not exposed to. So if I can integrate it, even though we don't have a separate course, they'll still be exposed to it at my school. There's also an underrepresentation of women in the computer science industry. So women represent around 56% of all university graduates, yet they only represent around 12% of computer science graduates. So I think as a female, it's important to show my students that girls code too. So who doesn't like to make and invent and create? Who wants to bring the maker movement into their classroom? Coding is a great mechanism to bring the maker movement into your classroom and get your kids building, exploring, and creating. So this is my story about how I brought coding into my classroom and integrated coding to teach thinking skills, character development, and my curriculum. Thank you.
Yeah.